Okay, hello, it's me again. Back for another 1 hour long, I'm starting my stopwatch now, Euro Truck Simulator 2 play. Now, in the background, you are going to have Kozmik Radio, as in previous videos. And here's me playing, already on a job. I've just gone past the rest place, haven't I, Dan? Yes, I need to get some sleep. I've already started a long job here. From Bratislava all the way to Aberdeen. I'm not concentrating on what I'm doing at the moment. It sounds swerving all over the place, but not only is it going to be Kozmik Radio in the background, but yes, the chap's yawning, but also going to be an archived version of Jeff Rense, speaking for the first time to Alan Watt.
Working, who are sincere, who are honest, are not making any money. They're doing this basically out of their own pocket, if they have many pockets to go to. And at the top of Alan's website, he has just a note here for people. It says, your support finances this information into existence. Each bootleg copy of the books, CDs, and DVDs starves the source into closing down. Your choice. I can return to teaching small groups in person in order to survive. I receive no payment for all the guest appearances on radio and TV, which are available for free download. So play fair, help the source. And I would underscore that. We need to all play fair and support people who are working on all of our behalves to try to shake the lethargy off what's left of the thinking American public. It's no mean feat. It's a tough It's a very tough task, and Alan is one of the people working very hard to do that. So, my friend, you're here, and we're all ears, as it were, and cuttingthroughthematrix.com rather sums it up. When did you become aware of the great game that was going on? Not that it's a game of fun, it's a very deadly game.
Really, I as far back as I can remember, I knew that things weren't as they appeared, even from childhood. Just by observing adults, watching and listening what the arguments were about, and being brought up in Britain especially, I thought, well, an empire probably was ruled by London for centuries, and how come in all these working class areas, everyone was just pushing by to buy either rent or bare essentials.
Right.
They didn't have credit cards back then.
Wage slaves, even then.
Yeah, and yet when you're small, you see, and you visit your friend's home, you're ignored by the adults, so you can listen. And every house I've been to, I could hear parents arguing about the same basic things.
Alan Watt, the fly on the wall.
Yeah, and of course, it didn't take too long to dawn that you lived in a rigged system, where even the wages were rigged. You go from one end of the country to the other in any occupation, and there was always a starting wage and a maximum wage, which had to be fixed and organized too. And supposedly they called it a free market, so to not say morons, the free market would be all kinds of incentives.
Right.
They were not there.
Right. Fixed wages, that should be a giveaway for anyone looking at a paradigm to walk into. Right. What we have going on here is, I guess if we completely lose our sense of humor, we're finished. We have to laugh at some of it. It is so despicable and so absurd. Alan Greenspan, and I have the story, I don't know if you happen to see it or not, just the other day, I'll try to find it, said that he wanted more foreign workers of technical skills brought into the country to lower the wages paid to American skilled workers because they were too high. They need to equalize everything. That's his solution to people who work their entire lives to train themselves, to become skilled, and to get ahead. His solution is to bring in more visa workers from India and all over the world to work at 1/4 the salary, to knock that terrible wage that these people are earning down to a more equitable, shall we say, communistic level, which is what it's all about. This is all collectivism.
That collectivism,
get some rest.
It's a fascist elite a pathocracy is the proper term for it.
Pathocracy.
Yeah, they are
Very
basically
good.
psychopaths, and they are hereditary psychopaths that grew up or bodied up a long time ago, and they breed with each other. And this is an area of psychology that's been persecuted, in fact, even behind the Iron Curtain when it was on the go. Some of them then...
Hey look, there's some guys playing Farming Simulator over on the right-hand side.
As utter butchers, and then they went into a field of psychopathy. I realized, and this wasn't a new idea, many had studied Napoleon and other tyrants who came under popular demand and then went in a different direction. And then you find out that there's a fringe group in every generation of very intelligent people. If they're born into families who already exist with power, they are psychopathic, and they hold on to their power, but they employ from the lower classes of psychopaths, the bureaucracies, and the military characters.
Some guy tried overtaking me then,
and
there's a truck coming in the opposite direction.
They have certain MOs in every era. They always have their wars ongoing. They always take what appears to be a moral stand.
Fast!
And they always turn their own countries into prison states because they're terrified of the public. That's the bottom line.
Good recovery, though.
That's a great term, pathocracy.
No damage to the car.
The issue of blue bloods and people of, I'm not going to say upper caste, but people of money and power and greed and psychopathy do stay together, do breed together. It's all in the family, and for those of you out there, again, who are Al Gore supporters, that's fine. But understand that Al Gore ran with Joe Lieberman in the year 2000. Now, that doesn't tell you an awful lot. You're not listening. Your ears are plugged and your eyes are closed. Now, let's follow that just a half step further and bring it closer to Gore's family. Who did Al Gore's daughter marry? I've told you folks this before. Al Gore's daughter married the grandson of Jacob Schiff. Okay? It's all, if you don't know who Jacob Schiff is, Google search it. It's all in the family. This is one small strata of people in the Western world, and probably the Eastern world as well, who maintain almost diabolically complete control over billions of people and uncountable resources. It's extraordinary. So again, these people play together, they stay together, they marry within their caste, and that's how they perpetuate.
Yep.
Oh, here's the Greenspan story. Let me just read this for a moment, if I might, Alan Watt. This is fascinating. Alan Greenspan is worried about, now think about this. All right, think about communism, fascism, whatever label you want to hang up. They're a little bit blurry these days, but let me read the story to you. Alan Greenspan is worried about income inequalities in the United States. But before you jump up with joy that Greenspan is finally speaking out against the skyrocketing salaries of CEOs, hold your celebrations for another time. Greenspan's big worry is that skilled workers get paid way too much compared with the rest of our population. And judging by Greenspan's comments when he talks about skilled workers, he isn't talking about CEOs and other assorted corporate fat cats that earn multi-million-dollar salaries. He is probably talking about you. Give Greenspan credit for one thing. He not only identifies our national problems, he offers solutions. Of course, if you happen to be a skilled worker, Greenspan's solution won't sound too appealing. The hero of the corporatocrats and the plutocrats wants to distribute your income into the hands of needy billionaires by using H-1B visa skilled workers to knock you off your haughty middle-class pedestal. Clever, eh? Here's what Greenspan says. Our skilled wages are higher than anywhere in the world. If we open up a significant window for skilled workers, that would suppress the skilled wage level and end the concentration of income in America. Well, there you have it. Now, what do you call that, Alan?
Well, this is just the agenda. See, they've written about this agenda for years, Many of their own members have written about the agenda. These groups are never made popular by the media, who'd rather have us focusing on what's happening in Hollywood. But the Brzezinskis, the Jack Vitalis, who wrote about unification of America back in 1990, and he was the Kissinger of Europe, Jack Vitalis. He headed the European Union. He said the next boat people leaving, traveling the world would be Americans, that they were leaving, looking for work abroad. That's what he said, when they eventually bring the borders down. So you're watching the global plantation come into view.
What is his name again?
Jack Vitalis. Attilai.
This man who was...
He wrote Millennium. That was about the American Union.
That's 17 years ago.
Yeah.
So they don't really hide much anymore. They put it out there, but in the rush of media frenzy or self-aggrandizement, most Americans don't see it. Couldn't care less, really.
That's the media's job.
It is, exactly. It's a diversionary drug, and we'll be right back with Alan Watt. Welcome back. Our conversation with Alan Watt. Alan is a long-term researcher into the causative forces behind major changes in historical development. Born in Scotland, he watched the subtleties of politics and media as they guided the population of the UK covertly into a European amalgamation. He has been warning the North American people for some years now that the same process of amalgamation is being carried out, and boy, do we see it now. It is right there, rearing its ugly, multi-headed faces into our faces. Now it's called the North American Union. They've rolled it right out in front. It's right there in broad daylight. No more subtlety, no more stealth. It's there, and they're pushing it, and it's coming.
It's coming, and we prepared for years for any fallout from the American people by building up massive internal armies, myriads of them under different names, to deal with the problem, which they foresee. Europe went through pretty well. They were fooled to the bitter end. And even when the countries voted against the European Union, they were told they were going to get it anyway. However, they didn't do much more than complain about it. They do expect some problems within the U.S.
I was surprised, and remain so, and I did indicate that on a number of occasions in the past, at how easily Europe was steamrolled. I thought that the countries of the EU had more backbone. I thought that they had, well, certainly they had centuries and centuries of history, of artistic, literary, scientific achievement, they had catastrophes like all nations, but my God, these countries were almost treasures, each in their own right, in terms of their history, and they folded up like a house of cards. At least that's how it appeared over here.
That's how it appeared. However, you see what was released after the Union was complete and the Parliament was set up. They declassified the documentation to do with the Union, which had been started. It had been signed actually in 1945 under the UN auspices.
Really?
And each country in Europe had a covert department which officially set up in 1948 with bureaucrats working across the channel with each other and having annual meetings as they gradually set this up. And it stated right there when they declassified it, the public must never be told the truth until it was all complete and finished.
That was a 50-year plan.
That was a 50-year plan. These guys worked with 50, 100-year plans, just like the Soviet Union did, just like the United Nations did. And this is how it worked, you see. And first they introduced decimalization into Britain many years before. I knew that was the start of it. They changed the currency, and then everything went metric. And And sure enough, each prime minister lied and lied and lied and denied they were actually uniting. That was their job, because governments do not serve the people. They never have, in actual fact. They serve a plutocracy of these psychopaths, basically. They're picked and vetted by them before they publicly even see them to vote for.
Correct.
Yeah.
And on the odd occasion when someone does get through who is unique, who is outspoken, who doesn't want to play the game, they don't get far or they're eliminated. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely, absolutely. And because, once again, even the higher bureaucrats are picked, they're given psychological examinations. They know they have psychopathic qualities and traits, so they're also picked because they will only serve their paymaster and they have no conscience as to what's to be done to the people beneath them. This is how this entire structure works today.
Many of them, of course, are restricted, compromised, blackmailed, or threatened with things. The methods of control are certainly many, but the bottom of the issue is always one of control. When you boil it down, we're talking about control.
Yep.
And they can control anybody they want at any time, and if they can't, they'll kill them.
They kill them, and also, if you go into Aldous Huxley, who was one of them, he was descended from Sir Thomas Huxley, who chose the main authors to write fiction and non-fiction for predictive programming purposes to get the public to go along with these agendas. He chose H.G. Wells, in fact. Yeah, and Huxley said himself at Berkeley, he says, I don't see why a scientifically run dictatorship could not exist forever. He said the reason the elites in past ages failed was because they couldn't supply enough bread and circuses to the people. But it is under a scientifically controlled dictatorship where you get children from kindergarten and indoctrinate them scientifically, and then you get the culture industry which gives them their culture. Then he said that there's no reason why it should ever fail.
Who was it, Stalin or Lenin, who said, I don't care about your adults, give me the children, and we'll take care of them there.
Yeah, he said that after, in fact, Ignatius Loyola also said the same thing. He just give him a child before the age of 7 and I'll make him into whatever I wish.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the techniques never change because they do work, you see.
Oh, they work perfectly. Cradle to grave now, and the scientific aspect of world dictatorship, which I don't care what I mentioned earlier, labels. Labels mean next to nothing anymore. It's all about power and control. That's what
Power,
it is.
total control. It was Beria who was the head of the secret police in the old Soviet Union in the 1930s. And with the NKVD, he said at the Comintern meeting, International Communist meeting, he said, we can now alter the culture with an upgrade it every 5 years, where it used to take us 70 years to make one change.
And when did he say this?
1933.
Wow. I guess that's about the time Tavistock cranked up its engines as well. Social engineering. Edward L. Bernays, of course, the father of SPIN, the father of mass propaganda, practiced by the Germans, but practiced just as well as the Germans did by practically every other so-called major power on the planet. The Chinese had a goal, the communist Chinese, to put a television in every home by the year 2001, and I believe they met that goal. They know. We'll talk more about TV, perhaps, with Alan Watt, among many other things, in just a few minutes. Glad you're along. Don't go away. Visit Alan's website at cuttingthroughthematrix.com. Okay, welcome back. Talking with Alan Watt. Before we talk about television, Alan, on your website, many of your listings on the left are topic-oriented, but you always have, almost always have musical selections, a song or something which states the issue or at least leads the way, further amplifies the matters under discussion. There's one that I ran into on Google Video, written by Leonard Cohen. I don't know the name of the song.
On my site?
It's one of it's Reality Check with Alan Watt.
He has a few there. He has The Future. That was, he puts it all into one song called The Future.
Yes, that's what it is, yeah. You don't know me from the wind.
That's right.
You never will.
Yep.
You never did. I'm the little Jew who wrote the Bible.
Yeah.
I've seen the nations rise and fall. I've heard their stories, heard them all. But love's the only engine of survival.
Yeah.
Your servant here has been told to say it clear, to say it cold. It's over. It ain't going any further. And now the wheels of heaven stop. You feel the devil's riding crop. Get ready for the future. It is murder. Things are going to slide in all directions. Won't be nothing you can measure anymore. The blizzard of the world has crossed the threshold, and it has overturned the order of the soul. They said repent. I wonder what they meant. An interesting set of lyrics.
Yeah.
Leonard
knows what's going on.
Yeah, he does.
He's well aware. He's well aware of the culture industry's part in all of this, because we do have a culture industry. So did our parents, that guided us all up to this point and gave their ideas. We copy the fashions, we copy the sayings, the dances.
Culture industry / religion.
Yes. And a lot of what Leonard takes too is from the mysteries and the Talmud, because there's a lot of truth there too. And it's all to do with the inner religion of the elite at the top, because they do have an inner religion, which, I think it was Bush Sr., when he gave his first New World Order speech on 9/11, 1990, odd date to give it. And then he repeated it the following year on 9/11 as well.
Come on, he did?
Yes, he did.
No. What are the odds? What are the odds, folks?
Yes, and we're supposed to take this all as usual. And he said, that's when he said, I see a new world order coming into view. But he also added that it's all going to the heavenly plan. And they never explained to the public, and of course the media know not to ask what he really meant.
Right.
But he's given a high decree to the high order of occultic masonry, the top, the high degree type. And it's going to the zodiac. The zodiac is a time clock. And every figure they have in the zodiac has nothing to do with telling your future. That's the lower thing for the people to believe in. It's actually, each part of the zodiac is part of the plan. And we're now going into the age of Aquarius.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that's the whole point of it. During the age of Aquarius, why do you think they waited until recently to bring up the homosexual movement to prominence?
Now, they certainly did that about 20, 25 years ago. It began on television with, what was that old TV sitcom that with the first two gals and a guy? The guy was played by young John Ritter.
Three's Company.
That was it. Three's Company. That was the first one I remember seeing, which pushed it. And I said, okay, like you did. Here it is. It's on. This is the first of an avalanche. It's coming.
And then you had the lesbian movement, which actually demonstrated for the rights of homosexuals. No one could figure this one out, because they're all funded to do this, by the way.
Sure.
Because in the age of Aquarius is actually a male god who was the most beautiful boy who lived in the Grecian islands. And he was raped by Zeus, the homosexual rape, and placed into the heavens. This is the time for the new man to come forward. That's why the age of Aquarius is what it is.
They're also portraying men and have portrayed males on television now, especially in these sitcoms. I have another word for them. But they portray them, of course, as weak, and subservient to the domineering female.
Yep.
This has become a feminist culture to a large degree, and elevating homosexuality, especially male homosexuality, has been a key component of this for a long time. The destruction of the nuclear family in the United States with the breadwinning male and the supportive and steadfast wife and the children, well, that's over. That's really ancient history now. It's all gone.
1 month before 9/11 happened, it was in the newspapers, a few paragraphs about an international censorship meeting. Now, most people think their own department of censorship for television, radio, etc. is to protect your culture. That's what we presume.
We would.
However, at this meeting, they stated we have broken through the barriers for various rights for homosexual and lesbians, and that we're now pushing the next step, which will be for intergenerational sex, and that will be promoted on television. And the following day in the newspapers, one professor in Toronto, one in, I think, Harvard States, both gave the exact same speech in different newspapers to back up this very thing. So our censorship committees do not work for the people. They're there to test the waters and see if it's ready to push the next part of the envelope.
How low
That's their
can they
job.
go?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we are guided. Our thoughts are not ours. Even those groups who think they're benefiting are being used to destroy the old, to bring in the new, which is a completely isolated individual in society with no small tribe to back him up, no family even to back him up. The government will talk directly down to you, and that's the end. That makes it much easier for those at the top to control everyone. Yeah.
The issue of dominance is now made so easy. There are very few random events anymore. There are accidents, of course, but in general, any large political issue or geomilitary issue is usually well planned out in advance. There are a few resistors on the planet. North Korea, perhaps, although they are certainly the agent of the Communist Chinese in many ways. The Iranians, Saddam Hussein was one. The Taliban made the mistake of not saying yes, sir, at the right time. It's all an articulated setup, folks. Back in just a minute with Alan Watt. Okay, back with Alan Watt, and go to guests at Rense.com, click on Alan Watt, his name, and you go right to his website, through-the-matrix.com. A lot of material there, very interesting indeed. And if you're not able to click on his name, just hit reload, make sure you reload that page frequently. Things change often at Rense.com, usually it's the news that changes, but we often change other things as well. Alan, what about television? The media. Let's talk more about this. Our young people now are absolutely reverential for these really vile, hideous, vapid role models that are shoved down their little intellectual, mental, conscious throats 24 hours a day. These people that are put up there as role models are, in so many cases, as you've indicated, fully deserving of the term psychopathic. They're mentally aberrant. They're certainly sexually aberrant in many ways. There are hardly good role models there for our young people, and that's what worries me with the government school system now being as crude as it is and as effective as it is with the curricula that it is offering. I don't know how our young people really have much of a chance anymore, do they?
To be honest, they don't. In fact, the generation that's up and coming will have less chance than the previous ones, because within every generation they've targeted literally the brain through inoculation. And it's a horrific conclusion to come to, but when you go through the history of the inoculations, you come across people like Salk, who gave us the polio vaccine, supposedly, and then you follow the rise of autism that followed in its wake, and the amount of different learning disabilities. These are all literally levels of autism. And then you couple in Salk's background. This man was a member of the World Eugenics Society.
He was right in there.
He was a believer, a true believer in culling back the lessers at the bottom, which is always the fear of the elite. The amount of ordinary people will overwhelm the psychopathic crew that run the world. And suddenly he comes out as the benefactor of society, supposedly. And then you find that they knew that there was over 100-odd live simian viruses in every polio shot.
SV40.
And they also knew exactly what each one would do to the human body, Then you come across writings by people like Arthur Koestler, who worked for the elite. He worked for think tanks at the United Nations. His job was to find ways to bring viruses or bacterium or chemicals and guide them to specific parts of the human brain to lobotomize them. And he said to lobotomize that part of the brain that makes you, your higher critical analytical capabilities would be gone. He said this must be done to the general population for world peace. Then you go into his history before he worked for the United Nations and New York. And this man was an officer under Stalin, who tells you in his own book, The Ghost in the Machine, that he helped to bring on the starvation, the massacre of millions through starvations in Hungary under the orders of Stalin. And he put down to historical necessity. It had to be wiped out, so they starved them to death. And he felt nothing. Well, the man never changed his whole life because he was a psychopath. And he truly believed that his job was to find ways to lobotomize physically every ordinary human being on the planet. And he said that his team at the United Nations was only one team working on the same problem. He says we have the methods to do it. We can target any area perfectly. All we have to do now is decide where to keep using inoculation, add it to the water or the food supply. And his own book.
Right. Well, like I say, no stealth is really all out there. They don't hide it. That's the bizarre part about this. They just know that very few people are going to go looking for it, and even those who find it will have very little success
24/7
any kind
on
of
kozmikradio.com.
Through which they can publicize it. And who's going to believe it anyway?
Well, that's what Brzezinski said in his own book. But Brzezinski's a big player in all of this. You find the same people never retire from being advisors to governments and presidents. That's their job.
Right. Being
good psychopaths, they have certain skills.
And look at the crew in Washington now. How many of them have been there for decades?
Yes. Yes, you got a real crew of top-grade psychopaths there, who've been behind many wars and many murders, and they sleep well at night like good psychopaths, and they don't need sleeping pills.
It's amazing.
Scary.
I have up at featured stories at Rense.com a number of very important, excellent lineup of stories and material that I would urge all of you to read. One of them is particularly fascinating to me because I've been aware of this for quite some time. And as you know, Alan, and as many of you folks know, when you see it in print and they talk about they're experimenting with, that maybe someday they'll be able to do something, it usually means they've already done it. It's already old news. Now, the ABC News story is entitled, Erasing the Pain of the Past. Scientists are have developed drugs that could eliminate traumatic events from our memories. I'd take it in a second, said Sergeant Michael Walcott, an Iraq War veteran, referring to an experimental drug with the potential to target and erase traumatic memories. Walcott, who served in Balad-based transportation unit in Iraq that regularly took mortar fire and now suffers from PTSD. Since returning to the United States 2 years ago, he has been on antidepressants, and that's another major tool, by the way, of global control and governance, and in group therapy, as he tries to put his life back together and heal from the psychological scars of war. Goes on from there, but the bottom line is that they are now on the verge of formally announcing medications that will help people forget. Now, it's not hard for you to imagine where this is going to go. Talk about the old communist term of rehabilitating someone, Alan.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It started after Korea, in fact, with a psychiatrist who became famous in the industry for bringing out 5-minute post-orbital lobotomies, and he performed them on American troops coming back, one after another in huge lines, and he could do it by inserting a probe run behind the eye and literally cutting parts of the frontal cortex.
5
but
minutes.
They've been at this for a long time. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, yes, we are certainly chemically on the doorstep now of formally being able to alter the brain's memory. I think you know where it'll go. They'll do it next with electromagnetics. There are many people now who believe that technology already is extant as well, that they can get into the mind, change it, alter it, and so forth. There will come a time, not too far down the road, when people probably will be given the choice by the courts of going to prison for 20 to 25 years or submitting to a chemical lobotomy. They won't call it that, they'll call it something else, but that's what these drugs basically are all about.
It's already been done in Britain in some cases where they mandate in court a chip in the brain. That's there, it's here now. Yeah.
This is all really being unfurled at an incredible pace. I honestly didn't think, I knew, not perhaps with the articulation that you've been viewing life, but I knew that things were going in a very, very depressing and morbid direction for a long time. I did not expect it to be rolled out this quickly.
They have to because they have a time schedule.
They have a window and they've got to jump through it.
They have to. If they let it go on too long, there'll be too much opposition from the ordinary people who start sharing intelligence. And right now, we've got so much counterintelligence to wrap it up into weird areas to divert them. And but they know they can only hold this for so long before they start to lose it. So they must give us crisis upon crisis as they ram it all through.
Sure, and their step, of course, is to push ahead a mile and then retreat an eighth of a mile if they have to and back off. But they've still made enormous gains every time. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, whatever, you're still ahead. And even if you're falling on your face, you're still moving ahead. So they just don't know backwards. That's right.
And it's a massive machinery of coordination from the top down through all their employees, the bureaucracies, methods of control. They all work together and try to mesh this all together at the same time. And if something happens in a whole area is out of sync, they start to lose, and they know this. So they're very edgy right now.
It is amazing to me to watch again the electronic media in this country and how powerful it has become. I pulled the plug on television almost 19 years ago now. I don't watch commercial television. I don't have commercial television. I do see it occasionally out and about, and what I see is appalling to me. The imagery, the commercials, the pacing. I remember 20 years ago watching so-called children's television and being stunned even then, having come from a background in television news and production. The commercials then, they had in a 30-second commercial sometimes between 50 and 60 different scene cuts, and none of the scenes were static shots. They'd all be moving shots. So you have this visual amphetamine diet that children are fed, and then of course the audio would be fast-paced as well. And so these kids are literally strung out on speed, audio, video speed, and then they're going to class at the age of 5 and expected to sit still after being fed a huge dose of sugar for breakfast. nutritionally depraved food. It's not even food, it's something else, it's products. This is all anticipated. And then they did what next? As we go to our break, they decided to name this disorder ADD or ADHD. And then they did what? They introduced drugs to cure it. This was all planned by Alan Watt. No surprises. All right, stand by. We'll be right back. Another hour to go with our conversation tonight with Alan Watt. Welcome back. Talking with Alan Watt. 2 hours tonight. Getting his views on things. Many of the views, of course, are amplifying what we've talked about for many, many years. Alan, what would you like to discuss this hour? I don't want to leave the conversation on. We've got much to talk about.
I think people have to realize that everything which they take for granted as their culture was literally meticulously planned for them from the top, from professional people. This was stated by Lord Bertrand Russell back in the 1950s when he said that we, the elite, must bring in the big Madison Avenue crew that can do marketing and market culture straight to the people. Now, they'd already been doing it for long enough, but less scientifically, and they thought they could bring the specialists in to give us our opinions. And sure enough, everything is marketed to the public through fashion, through music, through entertainment, even through the novels you read. This is not new. In the late 1800s, the Rothschilds set up foundations for novelists to start to, they would fund them to write specific stories concerning even future space travel. And this was all because to go along with this particular idea of thought, so that when it came into view, way down the road in the next century, it would seem quite a natural road to have taken. That's called predictive programming long term. Everything that we are fascinated by, in fact, is marketed to us. And we think it's our ideas, even the music. I mean, I used to be in the music industry, in studios and writing for different groups and individuals. And I've seen it all. I've seen how it's produced, how it's made, what is to be promoted. It comes down through the grapevine, what's politically correct to push to the youngsters, and every writer gets the word. There's nothing that happens which we take for granted, in fact, that isn't decided, planned, and debated by think tanks.
Now excuse me, Al, but this goes back to Dr. John Coleman's book on the Committee of 300 and Tavistock, and he made it quite clear that the entire psychedelic rock music era with the Beatles and so forth was no accident. People laughed and said, "What do you mean? The Beatles weren't working for the globalist elite?" No, but the music that they were producing was certainly given a fast track and was quite good at the time. It was as if the actual times were structured to accept that kind of a sound rather than the other way around.
Yes, it was. And in fact, it had been tried before. You see, initially they tried to start the destruction of family life by bringing in promiscuity back in the late 1800s. Once again, it was the tutor of H.G. Wells who put that forth, that free love must be made a big part of culture for the youth. So in the 1920s, you had the Roaring Twenties, you had a miniskirt for the Charleston dance,
Yep.
You had they made the booze cans very attractive places to go. They brought cocaine in at the same time, but the fallout from it all was massive unwanted pregnancy and venereal diseases. And that's when the boys' towns and all their orphanages suddenly opened up, and they didn't have the freedom of abortion clinics. We had backstreet abortion. So they went back, they repackaged it, they wasted their time. They tried the jazz first through the beatniks and drugs. That didn't take on in Britain, but it took on in Europe. And so then they repackaged and came back with what they called the pop industry, and then the rock industry. So father was pop, you see, and then you have rock, the foundation of the builders.
You got it.
And rock. So they brought in the drugs again at the same time, a new type of music, the miniskirt again, but this time they also started pushing the pill, birth control and abortion, and yet penicillin for the basic venereal diseases.
So that was the second launching of that whole thing. It didn't work the first time. It got out of control. Yeah. But the same thing was brought back, repackaged with a scientific veneer, as it were, and it worked.
It worked. And they used professionals behind the Beatles and other ones to make those records. You know that the Beatles never ever owned the rights of their songs. You know? Theo Adorno owned them until he died. Theo Adorno is a fascinating character who really was a student of the dialectic, the Hegelian dialectic, and amazing mind, but he was also psychopathic.
His name again is Theo?
Yeah, Theodor Adorno, professor of music at university in Germany and eventually in London and New York.
Adorno?
Yeah.
Adorno. He owned all the rights to the Beatles' music.
And then I think it was in the 80s, he died. And Paul McCartney put a bid in trying to get some. And Michael Jackson outbid him. So at present, Michael Jackson owns them.
He owns it. It's called the Beatles Songbook or catalog,
yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, the whole pop culture, psychedelic, well, I'll tell you this, from the music of that time, it worked magnificently. The results, I think, probably exceeded their fondest expectations. They introduced LSD, they introduced marijuana. Cocaine again came in, and there's more cocaine in this country than probably any other kind of narcotic or drug, I understand now. But in the 20s, I've seen in the 30s, Hollywood starlets, they had high-heeled shoes, and in their high-heeled shoes, they put their cocaine. It was very common back then, you're right. And in straight-laced England, I guess things... That was a strange thing, the late 19th century, where the parlor was the entertainment stage of an entire culture, and illusionists and magicians and all kinds of metaphysical things were very much in vogue, and look how they've come back too.
That's right. You see, they had to launch initially. See, they had a lot of men in the upper middle classes into what they called Freemasonry, higher masonry, more the noble orders. And they had to get a middle class to bring in the middle class bureaucracies they needed to run the next part of the phase. So they brought the lower orders of Freemasonry into view. And in the 1800s, late 1800s, they had to get women in as well, especially middle class women. So they brought out Madame Blavatsky and trained her to go out there and to be mysterious and attract women. All in preparation for the coming century, in fact. And Blavatsky said it. She said that her mission was to blend Christianity with Hinduism, because they wanted to destroy Christianity. That was the last vestige of the old culture. And sure enough, in the 1960s, all of that was brought forth. The Beatles were told to go over to India. At that time, they had millions of fans who mentally followed them. The bookstores across the US and Canada suddenly, and Britain, became flooded with New Age books on Hinduism, tantras and all the rest of it, and yoga. And that was the start of it. So it took 100 years to prepare that whole phase.
Somebody emailed and asked why they plan over such long periods of time when many of them won't be alive to see the results of it.
Because they are the builders. If you understand even the Masons, the real Freemasons or stonemasons of the Middle Ages, never mind the architects. They would plan cathedrals, massive cathedrals, that could take 5 or 6 or 7 generations of stonemasons to complete. These are intergenerational families who plan the future, knowing their offspring will take over and make it be, as they say.
It's remarkable when you think back about 20, 30 years ago, what was going on and what's going on now. I feel very sorry for I'm speaking in generalizations, all of you know that, but I feel very sorry for our youngest people. They are going to grow up in a world and they'll never know the kindness and the values and the gentleness of our youth, the way things were. They're going to know only crime and violence and overcrowded urban areas and non-stop noise, drugs, diversions, a lack of accountability, no responsibility. They'll know that if one does seek to achieve independent study, independent success, very often the peer group will tear at them viciously and pull them back down because they don't want to be left behind, and it is a threat if someone is different. So I've never seen such self-policing in my life among young people. These kids are just regimented to the teeth.
Well, the elite themselves understand that amongst the people beneath them, the commoners, as they like to call them, in every generation there are people who have a higher intelligence, who understand what's happening, and they say that certain types of individuals are their worst problem. The masses are easier to control. However, that's why they declared a war, officially, on individuality. That's their main enemy. That's why in schools everything is groupthink now.
Sure.
You're not allowed to have an independent decision or opinion on something.
No.
In fact, the classes are taught to shun you if you do.
And they do. And I've taught high school for a couple of years in California. About 15 years ago, and I just couldn't do it, even then. And now, having some teacher friends and so forth, and friends with kids in high school, it is grim. I don't have to tell you folks that out there who have kids. What do? You homeschool, but then your kids are going to be ostracized too. And even if you put them in wealthy private schools, it's the same TV, it's the same pop culture, it's the same Us magazine, People magazine, same trash. Listen to their music now. It all sounds almost the same. It's just amazing. Back in just a minute with Alan Watts. Okay, welcome back. And now here we are, after the turn of the century, even before the new millennium began, we had the age of the internet, Alan Watt, and it continues to explode and push in so many different directions. At once appearing to be a great forum, a new or perhaps last bastion of free speech and freedom of expression, but in reality, it is an incredible tool, again, of manipulation. Whenever there seems to be any progress made, there are, of course, agents, provocateurs, agents, disinformation, agents of all kinds turned loose on the internet, looking for big corporate interests, government interests, intelligence agencies, you name it. The internet is a jungle, in my humble estimation as well. And I don't know how people can actually be expected to walk into it and come away with any honest information without a great deal of research and intuition. I mean, it takes more than that, and that's one thing I think that they are trying to breed out of our young people, and it's that inner voice, that intuition that we all are born with. They don't like that.
They also know that its appearance aren't aware of reality themselves. This is a mammalian thing. All mammals towards the appearance for what they should be warned about, what you should be afraid of. The parents don't know and tell them. Be on the lookout to watch education. Not everything you're told is true,
Sure.
etc. Well, the children will accept everything they're born into as normal.
And they do.
And they do. They don't question it whatsoever. In fact, deep down, if you really ask them, they'll say, well, the adults wouldn't allow it unless it was okay. That's what they tell you.
And that's what the adults say. Well, the government wouldn't allow it unless it was okay. The FDA wouldn't allow me to eat this unless it was okay. The U.S. Department of Agriculture wouldn't allow us to eat this beef and other tainted commodities unless it was okay. This idea of passing the buck and allegedly trusting authority is probably the biggest lie of all.
It certainly is. And Zbigniew Brzezinski, in his book Between Two Ages, talks about this coming communication that they would give to the general public. He didn't say internet, but that's what he's referring to. And he said it will be given, promoted as a fantastic tool of information, but he said in reality it will be a device of control. There'll be a standardization because through this particular device of communication, you could create a new global culture, but also it would allow the people to put all information on the computer and the authorities to have an instant retrieval of everything each individual was doing.
And that's what they have. And they'll give up, as I say. They'll take 3 steps forward and a step back. They'll give up a step back, and people will be able to publish the truth on the internet, but they're not worried because they're holding nearly all the cards. So,
well, they actually said they called it information wars before they gave it to the public. In other words, they didn't wait until there was an opposition or people with knowledge after they gave us the internet. They already had trained teams and individuals, thousands, who would put up sites, big fancy sites to attract people in, and then guide the people below. There's big sites out there giving out what seems to be some factual information, but it's mixed with incredible disinformation. So the big boys don't wait until there's a problem. They foresee it because they have think tanks working always on problems that will come up in the future.
No, they don't play catch up at all, and they have access, of course, and have always had as long as we've had them, access to supercomputers, and they run models all the time. They're constantly running scenarios. We call them war games in a military sense, but they're running any kind of situation you can imagine into a supercomputer. They know plus or minus 2 or 3 percentage points how any given event is going to play out in advance. They know what the public will tolerate within, a few reasonable percentage points. This is really a scientific effort, and as every year rolls by, they make quantum leaps further into total control through the internet. They're now talking about making all America a wireless internet hookup, so you will not be able to escape it. I mean, literally, and you have palm-held internet terminals now. It's mind-blowing what can go on out
It's
there.
a training exercise.
Formidable German units are assembling
the final thing, which will be the brain chip, which will also be controlled by all the little microwave towers that are all across the city.
Yeah, they call them cell towers, but they're multi-purpose. Believe me, there'll be lots of things with these.
Yeah.
And first, they'll give up. They won't give up. They'll offer people the option of giving up their keyboard. How would you like to give your keyboard up? Why don't you speak? And they could do that right now if they wanted to. And then after that, why even speak when you can just think it? You see all this playing out. It may take 50 years.
We had the meetings, the global meetings on the brain chip at Loyola University. And they said it's ready to go. All we have to do now is convince the public step by step.
It may take 50 years. But again, they've got the time.
They have the time.
At the rate things are going, I wonder. The so-called... we have a break coming up here, Alan, but when we come back, we might spend a little bit of time talking about the Patriot movement, at least in terms of 9/11 and efforts to expose the monumental psychopathy which is now running this country and the Western world, as it were. And I'm not going to spare the Eastern world either. It just looks a little different over there. Stand by. We'll be right back with Alan Watt as we continue. I'm Jeff Rense. Glad you're along. Do visit our website at rense.com. That's rense.com. We try our best to bring you the best from the world of news and information, by which you are encouraged to think and make your own decisions. So I do present lots of conflicting material. No, I don't buy into all of it, but I think it's good to read things that you don't necessarily agree with and try to shake things up a little bit. Be right back with Alan in just a minute. Conversation with Alan Watt tonight. Alan, how do you counsel people when they sally forth into the land of the internet?
I find most people are already on it.
I mean, in terms of, all right, let's talk about people who are already on it but who are confused. I mean, I have never seen more smut and mud-flinging and characteristics.
And that's the hour. See you next time.